Howdy doody, ladies and gents. It's part 2 of daily number 458, where we learn to be a better gamer. Huzzah! On my hand is the USC IMD thesis shows stamps from last night. The interactive media division at USC is my alma mater. I think that's the right word. I got a master's degree from there a year ago. And at the end of each... I'm going to try again. The third-year thesis students at the Interactive Media Division all have their thesis show at the end of the year where they present all the interactive projects they've been working on for the full year. And it was a really cool show set up where when you walk in, you get like a passport for the show, and every time you visit an exhibit, you open up and they stamp the passport. Except I showed up too late and all the passports had been given out, so I was like, stamp my hand! And it was like, shuk, shuk, shuk. So now I have these cool tats and I'm all thuggish, bro. Pow. Ha! Part 1, a little bit longer of a part, but don't mind, because obviously got to plug the awesome tournaments coming up, like Red Bull Battlegrounds and MSI Battlegrounds at the Green Forest LAN. Please come to those. And we also got the chance to get a little bit of history of that matchup. I want to emphasize again that it is absolutely ridiculous to think that at all points in time in the game, both races should be on even footing. That is silly. It has never been that way in any RTS. And that's what makes it actually so awesome. I mean, even Terran vs. Zerg. At the start of the game, the Terran gets Hellions and pushes the Zerg back. And then Zerg gets Roaches and Speed Zerglings and pushes the Hellions away. And then there's the huge push forward with the, the Stim Marine Medevac Hellion pushes, pushing the Zerg back. But then Mutiling comes out and that pushes the Terran back. And then the Terran gets a huge force and is defended long enough to push out with 2/2 upgrades and on 3 bases. It's this cool back and forth that happens all over the place, and especially in this matchup, Terran vs. Protoss. The biggest push forward that you can make as Terran is in that 10 to 16 minute marks right when you get medevacs. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this game between EG's Puma. Again, this is also from IPL 4 in the Winners' Championship thing. Yeah, IPL Winners' Championship brackets. And again, we're going to see both players do fairly standard openings. I want to try to emphasize this with standard play as much as possible, because I don't want anything to be weird and confusing. So, Puma will begin by killing this neutral supply depot. So we see San doing, again, one of the most standard things in the world. Going for the 1-gate expand. Puma going for the 3 barracks expand. Protoss starts off the game with the map control edge. He has the Stalkers and he can push out. Terran has no vision. So again, Terran really can't do anything about this 1-gate Nexus. Excellent. Tech Lab coming out. San, what is he doing? Losing a Stalker. But you do occasionally want to poke forward with that Stalker and just be able to say things like, oh, at just after the 6-minute mark, if he's going for 3 barracks, he should have 7 or 8 Marines. Just knowing these sorts of things can be hyper-duper useful. So we see San getting 3 gateways up. This is honestly my favorite way to play this matchup, where you just start warping in a bunch of Zealot Stalker on those 3 gates. Puma building a 2nd barracks. Getting Stim. We'll be getting a +1. Come on. Come on. Looks like he got his factory a little bit early. Can't get the +1 quite on time, but there it goes. So again, Protoss still has this nice little edge. These are all very standard phases in this matchup. If any of this is coming as a shock, then this is of tremendous concern. 3-gate, pushing at the 8-minute mark with 5 to 6 sentries, and trying to pick off SCVs, or at the very least cause this to happen. When this occurs, we'd like to try to throw a force field down here and pinch these off at the front. This is just some various general cuteness. Puma getting different add-ons. But again, I'm limiting my commentary quite a bit. All I actually want to convey at this point in time is that Terran, no matter what build you do, 4 racks, 2 racks, 5 racks, 6 racks, you're passive until you get the medevacs up. And now it's go time. This is when we, as our Terran player, want to get our big edge. We have our 3 racks, our starport, our upgrade. Right on. We are in a much more heinous position than compared to the first game we saw, even the first 2 games we just saw Marine King Prime do. Our position is I would describe as strictly worse. The Protoss player here does have a third Nexus up. Is getting these additional gateways, has his Robo churning out Immortals. Does he already have an Observer? Wow, he has 2 Observers. Total boss mode. This is one thing that I love about getting this early Robo, is we can get these 2 Observers out so we can be spotting from multiple angles. Super good, super snazzy, as it should be. And Protoss is just teching up ridiculously, stupidly, hyper hard. And notice how tiny a force this is. 16 Marines, 4 Marauders, doesn't matter. Our force is way faster and way more maneuverable. So it's in this period of time that, boom, getting the command center up, boom, getting this engineering bay armory stuff up. We want to try to get as much late game stuff up as possible, and there's really not that much that you can do about it. And sure, we try to do this push up here. Someone could describe it as a failure, but every time you think it's a failure, just come back to the Protoss vision. Protoss can't do anything. Sure, he has an observer here and can see what's going on. He has a pylon. He has control of the watchtower. But he can't actually go on and press us. We, in turn, for Protoss, we're getting some sort of anti-drop measure. But everything Puma's doing is super active, all out, all over the map. Another big drop. We haven't done anything micro-intensively crazy thus far. We're literally just walking left and right. Other important steps in this mid-game is to gobble up control of every single watchtower on the entire map. And just to spread the opponent out. We're not doing crazy micro techniques. We're just doing some micro where we can always do these sorts of lift-ups. We even did a little bit of a poke and prod here while all this was going on. Hey, it looks like we finally managed to break the Protoss. Again, the Protoss is going for this ridiculous, massive late-game army, essentially unimpeded. He's keeping up on the probe count. He's getting all the essential upgrades. We're taking our third base, but we still have quite a long bit of time. The next step as a Terran is generally just to throw down a 4th command center right now if he's on these 3 command centers. This is what we saw Select do against Wild State a little ways back. And all these drops don't really require that sophisticated of micro. This one medevac looks like it managed to get away. If we go to the Units Lost tab, we also see that, yeah, the Protoss has been losing a good bit more, but the Protoss hasn't been completely devastated. All that we've actually succeeded in doing that is huge and solid as Terran is keeping the Protoss passive. Always coming back to the vision centers, we see that this Protoss is just chilling, doing nothing, hanging out. Upgrades going down for Puma, more barracks going down. And it's a nice step. 3 barracks, build a command center. 2 barracks. And now another 3 barracks, and we're going to see another command center. And just as before, we see a hyper-aggressive mixture. Vikings, double Viking, because we have this edge of control in the middle of the map. That's an essential thing to identify. Right now, I as Puma can wander onto the center of the map unimpeded. So there's the 4th command center coming up. Boom! 2 medevacs coming out. Ghosts, where's the Ghost Academy? Yeah, the Ghost Academy, I think this could even be delayed by another minute or so. But from 10 to 16 minutes, Protoss has been in total defensive mode. Puma's been constantly pushing nonstop. So, as we come back to this creator's point of view, playing under the NSH San name, if we actually look at this composition, sure, there's a lot of Stalkers and Zealots and the Colossus, but Charge has not even been finished. 2-2 is halfway done. A second Colossus has only just now popped out. There's no point in time when this Protoss player could have actually moved out of his base. And still can't really. So Puma just constantly bounces back and forth throughout all this. Easily blocking this, another command center going down. More barracks can also be thrown down here. But relating this back to that Blizzard article that I was talking about at the start of the daily, it's not like Puma is killing San or killing Creator in the mid-game. It's not like he's getting in there and wiping out essential tech structures. It's not like he's denied San from getting a third up the whole game long. None of that has happened. All we've seen Puma do is move around, do some drops, maybe pick off a couple of probes. How many probes has he picked off? Let me actually take a look. Oh no, I hit Control-T and started the replay over again. Not what I wanted to do. And yeah, I mean, he's killed 18 workers, which is great, but hasn't crippled Protoss by any means. All that Puma has done is been aggressive and got more expansion, got more expansions. Gotten the Ghost Academy up. And I think this is something that happens to a lot of Terran players, like how they'll mess up and not know what went wrong. They'll go for 3 barracks and the medevacs and they'll move out, but then they'll add on 3 more barracks and keep trying to attack on 2 base. And then around 13, 14 minutes, they'll take another expansion. That doesn't really exploit the niceness of the bid game for Terran. And look, this expansion moving out. What can Protoss do about this? Really nothing. Only now that we're hitting the 17-minute mark do we see that Creator is actually able to move out. He finally has more gateways, so that way he can defend against these counter drop pushes. 4th base up. Where's the 4th base for Protoss? Nowhere in sight. Protoss hasn't had the opportunity to do this yet. And now we are at somewhat of an intense position. Here is where I want to stop. Remember the comparison I made way back at the start of the daily? I was saying, think about a 1-base guy going 4-gate. He's basically trying to win the game right then and there, is all in, as people like to say. Now think of that Protoss on 2 bases with 4-gate. Totally has tons of long-term potential. Might even be not building out of the gateways. Might just be saving them for defense. Has a completely different feel to it. Same thing here. This Protoss, with this huge death ball force, I'll actually even come to this army tab. It's a pretty darn expensive army. He has these 3 bases. If we look at the main, his main is actually almost mined out. I want to say that one more time. San, Creator, at 17 minutes, finally maxes and is almost mined out. It has almost taken him his entire main's worth of time to get this death force up. Let's do another little look. As we head down here to the natural expansion, it is about half mined out. A little more than half, but I'll go ahead and say half mined out. And I'm just going to label his 3rd as totally fine. So in other words, I am definitely overstating how much has been mined. I'm considering this has not been mined at all, and that this has been half mined, when he's actually added more. It essentially means that San can only rebuild this army about once more. That's it. That's as many times as he can rebuild. And it's this status in the game that people seem to not acknowledge how absolutely critical an edge it is for Puma to have this 4th base and for San to not have a 4th base anywhere on the map. And Puma is rounding out his army composition with these additional ghosts. In terms of the reactor composition, we see that he's had 2 reactors of his initial 5. The next round of barracks looks like all have tech labs to be able to flood with ghosts very rapidly. But for the most part, we see a big chunk of Marines in this mixture. And now we'll really start to see this edge that Puma had taking flight. This obviously is going to take some slightly finicky control, but I selected games like this one because there's not amazing ghost stuff going down. There's just some standard moving around with Vikings, spreading things out. You don't have to be a genius to spread things out properly. And once we get into this engagement, just boxing the Marines, moving them out like this, making sure the medevacs are behind. Holy crap, is that important? Holy crap. Okay, I understand how if you do a drop, or if you do mid-game aggression, or any of that stuff, I understand how the medevac just sort of floats its way into the middle. You know, hell, if you drop the Marines, and then you start kiting, the medevac will always end up being in front. In these late-game battles, the medevacs have to be behind. You're going to take a couple of steps backwards, and they'll have a lot of Archon and Stalker, and if these medevacs are even simply on top of this Marine Marauder force, you're going to lose almost all your medevacs. Right then and there. So we see, you know, the nice ghost usage, not crazy-ness with the ghosts, but just some nice ghost usage. We can see now why it was so critical for us to have all our medevacs in the back, because they still wound up being at the front, and they're still taking damage. And given the way that we've been poking and prodding at Protoss all game long, we end up with what I guess I would describe as a near dead even exchange. Why was it a little favoring Puma? Because he forced the engagement back here by his planetary fortress, very excellently. But now, Protoss is totally screwed. He doesn't have a fourth base up. And what if Protoss hung out in the middle of the map and then started a fourth? We would be able to attack. We wouldn't have our planetary fortress, but our ghost would have a little bit more energy because we timed it quite nicely. We added on our Ghost Academy as we were getting our fourth base up. And just as in the mid-game, the Terran player can move about the map uninhibited. Anytime there is an exchange, anytime the unit count is somewhat small, Terran can once again move out around the map uninhibited. These small engagements are a dream for Terran. We see the stim for Puma, and I'd like to just state explicitly, this phase that we're in is just like another mid-game. It's just like another mid-game all over again. All we're trying to do is deny fourths. Terran vs. Protoss is really coming down to 3-base Protosses versus 4-base Terran. Because what could Creator have done about this base at any point in time? Nope. Couldn't really have done much at all. Now, as Protoss, we could probably end up going for some Storm. That's fine. Do note, though, that it's quite difficult to be able to get Storm up. We just don't really have that much more gas anymore. We have these 3 assimilators, but we can't both get a lot of Colossus up, and Archons, and Storm. So again, more nice engagements with this speed upgrade. We still are killing off all the Colossi. The reason this isn't working out as well for Puma is he has too many Marauders. Marines are the big important force in the late game. But even so, Puma is just trying to get in as many little tiny engagements as possible. Seems like an even battle. Seems like maybe didn't actually go very well for Puma. Why'd it go well? Denied a fourth here, denied a fourth here, kept the army small. And now we see Puma able to exploit this mid-game. Uh-oh. Remember at the midway through the part 2 when I was saying that he was low on money in the main? He's essentially mined out here. Is very close to mining this thing out in about 5 of the patches. And even the third is looking a little skimpy. Terran in an identical situation, but has the fortunate 4th base up. This 4th base, all a result of the mid-game. This is a mid-game 4th base snag by Puma. And this is what Last Shadow calls the time when Terran needs to rinse and repeat. He identifies what the Protoss composition is and just builds the right thing, gets an engagement, and rinses and repeats, which you can do. In fact, the rinse is when you get into the big trade and everything dies, but the repeat is, I have money so I rebuild. I, as Terran, can do the repeat part of the phrase rinse and repeat, but Protoss can't because we denied his 4th for so long. Cool. Protoss fighting for his dear life. Still not really able to get up this extra base. And Puma is just keeping an eye on things. This sort of harassment can be kind of potent, but I still think this is way too many Marauders. Just some Marauders is fine. Not a lot of Marauders, just some, just a couple Marauders. And then, once again, we see a huge engagement, where it's maxed again. Some ridiculous EMPs that just rip apart the Archons, or they should have ripped them apart a little bit faster. It ends up being a really close engagement. The planetary fortress does end up falling, But if this engagement occurred without the planetary fortress, you can see that Puma would have come out very far ahead because Puma essentially looked at what the composition that San was replenishing with around... Where was it? Around here. Around here, there were a couple of engagements around the... Actually, I think it was at 20 minutes. Yeah, I'll actually just come to this part. This is at 20 minutes. This is before that battle has happened. We see this engagement. Things die off. As we're doing this, we see Protoss still replenishing with Colossus, so we keep the Viking count high. We see him replenishing with Archon, so we get our Ghost count up. And Puma just identifies that composition. If there was only Zealot Archon, there would be virtually no Vikings. See here, as we see Creator replenishing with Zealot Archon, we see only Ghosts being made. We see no Vikings in production. Kills off a 4th, hangs back, gets his 4th up. Some pretty fancy control, but the idea still comes back to Puma is able to get these exchanges done properly in the late game only because in the mid game he was able to get this big expansion lead, and all he's doing is maintaining that, checking back and forth. Whoa, this is looking pretty grim for Creator. Nifty thrifty, nifty thrifty, nifty. And I guess we're just going to go ahead and watch one more engagement. Okay. Notice how important it is to emphasize the notion of rinse and repeat. With our expansion, we were able to get the repeat part. Protoss did not have this expansion up, so he is struggling money-wise to be able to create enough stuff. And all we need is one engagement that is bigly in our favor. Picking off some Colossus. Losing all our Vikings, a little bit dunce-like. Whoopsie daisies. But then, nothing but really good peas. A couple of basic kiting moves. And see you later, Protoss. So, one more thing that I want to relate this back to that I feel like a lot of people say pretty comfortably now in the current state of StarCraft 2, is they'll say things like, oh yeah, roaches, oh man, if you're maxed with roaches and the Protoss is also maxed, you're screwed with those roaches. Oh boy, are you effed. But if you're maxed with roaches and Protoss is at like 120 food, you can just overrun them with roaches. In other words, roaches are conditionally good. The circumstance in which they're good is if you are hitting max really fast and just going with it. Where do we see this? This is the Stefano style that everyone just freaks out about. The fact that Stefano maxed at 11 minutes and 11 seconds on roaches. And it ended up being very, very effective. That is something that a lot of people are very comfortable understanding. But it's the exact same thing here with the Marine Marauder Ghost mixture. Why is it so effective? Why is it working? Because we got this expansion edge. I am able to get to 200 maxed army with Marine Marauder Ghost Medevac Viking. The MMMVG force. Ah, God, my eye hurts. Hell, I'm popping this thing out. I'm able to get my maxed force up. Oh, my God. Much faster than my Protoss. And it's not that Marine Marauder... it's not that MMMVG is inherently better or worse than the Protoss army composition. It all relates back to the expansion. It is a conditionally good army. If Puma was on 2 base trying to take a 3rd when he got into some of those first engagements, he would be screwed. But because he was on 3 and establishing a 4th, he was able to bounce back and be in great shape and able to take this win. In part number 3, we're going to look at the mid-game being improperly done, I would say. We're going to see Marine King Prime doing some nice aggression, but not quite getting all his pieces up, and it ends up letting JYP get a little out of control. Going on to that right after this.